Amara was a young woman in her early 20s, full of dreams and confidence. She grew up in a loving family, with parents who taught her the importance of kindness, hard work, and believing in herself. Even though she came from a wealthy background, Amara never liked to show off. She dressed simply, spoke politely, and treated everyone with respect, no matter who they were. To her, life was not about proving her worth with fancy clothes or expensive accessories. It was about how you carried yourself and how you treated others. On a bright sunny morning, Amara decided to visit a famous luxury car dealership in the city. She had always loved cars, not just because of their beauty, but because each car told a story. Some reminded her of road trips with friends. Others made her think about her father's love for classic models. For months, she had been saving part of her own earnings from her small online business, hoping to buy a car she could call her own. Her father had offered to gift her one many times, but she wanted to experience the pride of making such a purchase herself. The dealership she chose was known for having the latest and most exclusive luxury cars. Shiny machines that made people stop and stare. Amara woke up early, put on her favorite jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and comfortable sneakers. She tied her hair in a neat bun and carried a small handbag. She didn't feel the need to wear designer clothes just to buy a car. In her mind, her money would speak louder than her appearance as she drove to the dealership in her modest old car. She felt excited. She imagined herself sitting behind the wheel of a beautiful new luxury vehicle, feeling the smooth leather seats and hearing the powerful engine come to life. She thought about how proud her father would be to see her buying a car with her own savings. Her heart raced with joy and anticipation. The dealership building stood tall and modern, with glass walls that allowed sunlight to bounce off the shiny cars inside. She parked her car across the street and walked toward the entrance. As the glass door slid open, she stepped inside, instantly greeted by the scent of polished leather and new car interiors. Around her, there were cars of every color: deep black, pearl white, metallic silver, and even a few in bold red and blue. The floor gleamed under the bright showroom lights, and soft instrumental music played in the background, giving the place a classy atmosphere. Amara smiled to herself as she slowly walked between the cars, admiring their designs. Her eyes sparkled when she spotted a Rolls-Royce Phantom at the far end of the showroom. She had seen pictures of it online, but seeing it in real life was something else entirely. The car seemed almost magically spotty, smooth, and flawless, the silver grille shining like a crown. She was so focused on the cars that she barely noticed the salespeople watching her. A few of them stood near the reception desk, whispering quietly. Amara, being the polite person she was, assumed they were just talking about work and didn't think much of it. She continued to admire the cars, running her fingers lightly over the edges of a sleek black sedan. In her heart, she was filled with genuine excitement. She wasn't there to waste anyone's time. She had money in her account, a plan in her mind, and a dream she was finally ready to turn into reality. She felt that this was going to be a special day, one she would remember forever. Little did she know, the day would indeed become unforgettable, but for reasons she could not yet imagine. At that moment, all she had was her pure enthusiasm, her love for beautiful cars, and the innocent belief that people would treat her with the same respect she offered them. She had no idea that her simple choice of outfits, her casual look, and the fact that she walked in alone would soon lead to an experience that would test her patience, dignity, and strength. If someone had told her that morning that her trip to the dealership would spark a chain of events that would go viral and be talked about for weeks, she would have laughed. She had only come to look at cars, maybe ask for a test drive, and see if there was a deal that matched her budget. But fate had something else in store for her, a twist that would reveal how quickly people could judge based on appearances, and how satisfying it could be to prove them wrong without even raising your voice. For now, Amara was just a young woman with a calm smile, taking her time to explore a room full of shiny, expensive cars, completely unaware that the very next moments would change the atmosphere of that showroom forever. As Amara walked deeper into the gleaming showroom, her steps light and unhurried, she began to notice something she had missed earlier. The atmosphere around her wasn't warm or welcoming, it was strangely tense. The smiles from the staff seemed tight, forced, and only appeared when another well-dressed customer walked by. When their eyes shifted to her, those smiles faded into blank or slightly curious stares, as though they were silently asking themselves, "What is she doing here?" Two salesmen stood a few feet away, pretending to arrange brochures on a glass counter, but their sideways glances kept drifting toward her. One of them, a tall man in a gray suit, leaned slightly toward his colleague and whispered something. The other smirked and glanced at Amara's simple outfit, her plain white t-shirt, her worn sneakers, the small handbag slung casually over her shoulder. The message in his eyes was clear. She doesn't look like she belongs here. Amara, still focused on the beautiful cars, didn't catch their exact words, but she could feel at the invisible wall of judgment. It wasn't new to her. Being a young black woman, she had grown up aware of the unspoken ways people sometimes tried to measure her worth by her clothes, her skin color, or the way she carried herself. But even so, it always stung. Near the reception desk, a young woman in a sharp black blazer was on the phone, but her eyes kept flicking toward Amara as if she were an unexpected guest. When Amara approached to ask about the price of a sleek silver Mercedes parked near the front, the receptionist's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her voice was polite, but cold, like she was answering out of duty, not genuine interest. Instead of offering to call a salesperson to assist her, the receptionist simply said, "The prices are on the information sheets next to the cars." Then, almost dismissively, she returned to her call. Amara nodded politely and walked toward the Mercedes anyway, reading the details. The price didn't shock her. She had done her research before coming here, but what did surprise her was the absence of help. She looked around. Other customers were being approached eagerly by sales staff, who opened doors for them, explained features, and offered refreshments. One man, dressed in a designer suit, had two salespeople practically competing to serve him. But Amara, she was left to wander as if she were invisible. Still, she kept her composure. She wasn't there to beg for attention, she was there to find a car. She slowly made her way toward the back of the showroom, where the Rolls-Royce Phantom stood like a king among all the other vehicles. Its paint was so flawless it reflected her face as she walked around it. Her heart beat a little faster. She reached out to touch the smooth surface, almost as if she could feel the power of the machine through her fingertips. That's when she heard Ita low chuckle from somewhere behind her. Turning slightly, she caught the salesman in the gray suit. Watching her, he muttered something under his breath to another staff member, and they both laughed softly. She didn't know exactly what was said, but the tone was clear. It wasn't kind. "Excuse me," she said calmly, walking toward them. "Could I take a closer look at that Rolls-Royce? I'd like to know more about its features." The taller salesman gave her a slow, almost mocking smile. "Ma'am," he began, his tone dripping with doubt, "the Rolls-Royce Phantom is, well, it's not really for browsing. It's a very exclusive car. We usually reserve viewings for serious buyers." For a brief second, Amara just looked at him, processing the implication. She knew exactly what he meant. "You don't look like someone who can afford this." She could have told him right then that her father owned not one, but several luxury cars. She could have told him that she had the money to buy the car outright, if she wanted to. But she didn't. She simply smiled and said, "I understand. Thank you." Her calmness seemed to irritate him, as if he expected her to be embarrassed or leave immediately. Instead, she continued looking at other cars. But with every step, she felt the weight of their stares. It wasn't just about her outfit. It was about the unspoken assumptions they had made about her life, her worth, and her place in that showroom. By the time she reached the entrance again, she realized something important. She had been judged. The moment she walked in, no matter how politely she spoke, no matter how much money she had in her bank account, they had already decided she didn't belong there. And that decision, she knew, was going to cost them dearly. Amara stood near the gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom, her eyes tracing every perfect curve of its body. For her, this was not just a car, it was a dream made real. She had worked hard, saved carefully, and planned for months, even if she couldn't buy the car today. She wanted to feel that sense of connection, to imagine herself behind the wheel. But before she could even step closer, the tall salesman in the gray suit returned, walking toward her with a slow, deliberate pace. His shoes clicked sharply against the polished floor, each step carrying a silent message of authority. When he stopped in front of her, his expression wasn't one of welcome, it was one of irritation. "Ma'am," he said, in a tone that balanced somewhere between fake politeness and open annoyance, "I'm going to have to ask you not to touch the car." Amara pulled her hand back instantly, a little startled. "Oh, I'm sorry. I was just admiring it," she replied gently. He gave a short, forced smile. "Yes, but these vehicles are extremely high value. We only allow serious buyers to get up close. I'm sure you understand." The words were coated in sugar, but carried the sting of insult. The way he said serious buyers made it painfully clear he didn't think she was one. "I am interested," she said softly. "Could you tell me more about it?" The salesman sighed, glancing toward the other staff as if to say, "Can you believe this?" Then, in a slightly louder voice, he replied, "Ma'am, with all due respect, this car starts at over $500,000. It's not the kind of purchase someone makes casually. Maybe you'd be more comfortable looking at our more affordable options." The last part hit her like a slap. She noticed a few customers looking over now, curious about the exchange. Her cheeks grew warm, not from embarrassment, but from the sharp sting of being underestimated. Still, she kept her composure. "I appreciate your concern," she said, her voice calm, though her chest felt tight. "But I know what I'm looking for." The salesman didn't budge. "Then perhaps you can return with an appointment," he said firmly. "Right now, I have other clients to attend to." With that, he stepped aside, as if clearing her path, not toward the car, but toward the exit. It was subtle, but the message was crystal clear. "Leave." The other staff didn't intervene. The receptionist busied herself with paperwork. The younger salesman beside the tall one looked at her with a smirk, as though watching an amusing scene play out. Even the customers who'd overheard seemed to quickly look away, unwilling to get involved. Amara stood there for a moment, her hands resting loosely by her sides, her breath slow and steady. She had been judged, dismissed, and pushed aside without a single question about who she was or what she could afford. And all of it had happened in under 10 minutes. Her instinct was to walk out quietly and never come back. But then, another thought bloomed in her mind, a thought that would change the course of the next 24 hours. She didn't need to raise her voice or prove herself right there in that moment. No, this kind of lesson was best delivered in silence. At the perfect time, so she simply nodded, smiled faintly, and said, "Thank you for your time." The tall salesman's lips curled into a polite but satisfied smile. He thought he'd gotten rid of her. "Of course," he replied, stepping away without another glance. Amara turned and walked toward the entrance, her steps measured and calm. But inside, something burned, a mixture of pride, dignity, and quiet determination. She pushed open the glass doors, stepping into the warm sunlight outside. Across the street, her modest old car waited. She climbed inside, started the engine, and pulled away without once looking back at the building. But as she drove off, her phone buzzed in her bag. She reached for it at a red light, her mind already knowing who she was going to call. The humiliation she had just endured would not end here. Tomorrow, the very same place would see her again, but next time, she wouldn't be coming alone. That evening, Amara sat in her bedroom, the soft glow of a lamp casting a warm circle of light over her desk. Outside, the city lights twinkled, but her thoughts were far from the calm night. She kept replaying the scene at the dealership over and over, the cold glances, the smirk of the young salesman, the way the tall man had all but shown her the door. She wasn't angry in the way some people get, loud, heated, ready to shout. No, her anger was quiet, steady and sharp, like a blade hidden in silk. It was the kind of anger that didn't fade quickly. For the first hour after coming home, she didn't tell anyone what had happened. She made herself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and tried to process it all. But no matter how many times she told herself to just let it go, the sting remained. It wasn't about the car. It wasn't even about the dealership. It was about the way they had looked at her, like she was less. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father. "How was your day, princess?" She stared at the words for a long moment, her fingers hovering over the screen. Her father, Camo Bennett, was not just a successful businessman. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country. His name carried weight in every corner of the city. He had built his empire from the ground up, starting with a small logistics company and expanding into real estate, international trade, and luxury imports. Amara knew that if she told him what had happened, he wouldn't take it lightly. But she also knew her father was not a man of loud threats. He preferred action swift, decisive, and unforgettable. Finally, she typed back, "Something happened today. Can I come talk to you?" Within minutes, her father's driver was at the gate, ready to bring her to the Bennett estate. When she arrived, her father was waiting in his study, dressed in his usual evening-style open-collared shirt, reading glasses in hand, a glass of aged whiskey on the side table. His eyes, warm but sharp, studied her face the moment she walked in. "Tell me," he said simply. So she did. She told him every detail, the way the receptionist barely looked at her, the whispers between salesmen, the laughter, and finally, the tall man's words about serious buyers and affordable options. She kept her tone steady, but inside, she felt the burn all over again. Cal listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then he set his glasses down and leaned back in his chair. "Do you want me to handle this?" he asked. Amara hesitated. "I don't want revenge," she said softly. I want them to understand. I want them to feel what it's like to be judged without reason." Her father's lips curved into the faintest smile, not of amusement, but of approval. "Then we'll do it your way. Silent, simple, and unforgettable." They didn't speak of it again for the rest of the evening. But before she went to bed, Amara glanced out of her window toward the garage where her father kept his most prized possessions, a collection of rare and luxury cars, each polished to perfection. Among them was the one that never failed to turn heads, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom, with a silver hood ornament that gleamed even in the dark. She knew what tomorrow would look like. She could already see it in her mind, the dealership, the shocked faces, the unspoken apologies in the eyes of those who had doubted her. And as she drifted to sleep, there was no anger left in her chest, only the quiet thrill of knowing that the next day she would walk back into that same place. And this time, the story would end very differently. The sun rose slowly over the city the next morning, painting the sky in shades of gold and soft pink. In the Bennett estate, the day began earlier than usual. There was a quiet hum of activity drivers moving in and out of the garage, polishing cars until they gleamed like mirrors, the low rumble of engines warming up. Something was happening, something deliberate, and it all began with a single phone. Amara had woken up before dawn, her mind already set on what needed to be done. The humiliation from yesterday still lingered in her memory, but today it felt different. Today, it was fuel. She didn't want loud arguments or dramatic shouting matches. No, she wanted the truth to speak for itself, and she knew exactly who could help her make that happen. She sat at the edge of her bed, phone in hand, staring at her father's number. She didn't need to dial. He was already expecting her call. The moment the line connected, his deep, steady voice answered. "Morning, Princess. Are you ready?" Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Yes, Dad. Let's do it." There was no need for more words. Her father understood. He had built his fortune in a world where people judged quickly and harshly. And he had learned to respond not with empty talk, but with presence, powerful, undeniable presence. By the time Amara came downstairs, the garage doors were open wide. Sunlight spilled over an almost unreal sight. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom parked at the center like a king on a throne, its chrome grille catching the light in dazzling flashes. On either side of it stood two more luxury vehicles from the family's collection, sleek Bentley Mulsanne and a Lamborghini Urus in pearl white. Each one was spotless, every curve reflecting the morning sun. The Bennett drivers stood ready, dressed in crisp black uniforms, hands clasped neatly behind their backs. There was an air of quiet anticipation, as if they all knew they were about to witness something that would be remembered for a long time. Her father emerged from the house, dressed sharply in a tailored charcoal suit, his cufflinks gleaming. He carried himself with a calm confidence, the kind that made people pay attention before he even spoke. As he walked toward the Rolls-Royce, one of the drivers opened the rear door for him. "Sit with me," he said to Amara, gesturing for her. To join him in the back seat, she slid into the plush leather interior, the faint scent of expensive leather and fresh polish wrapping around her. The car's engine purred quietly, powerful but controlled, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. As they pulled out of the driveway, her father glanced at her and said, "Remember, today isn't about anger. It's about showing them the truth without a single raised voice." Amara nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "They'll see," she replied. "They'll remember this day every time they look at a customer who doesn't fit their idea of what wealth looks like." The convoy moved smoothly through the city streets, drawing stares from pedestrians and drivers alike. The Rolls-Royce glided forward like a ship on calm waters, flanked by the Bentley and the Lamborghini. It wasn't just transportation, it was a statement. As they approached the neighborhood of the dealership, Amara's heart began to beat faster. She could already picture the glass walls of the showroom, the same sunlight spilling inside, the same salesmen moving around with their air of superiority. But today, the energy would shift the moment they saw what was pulling up outside. Her father's voice broke into her thoughts. "When we arrive, let me do the talking at first. Then, if you want to say something, you will, but only when it matters." She nodded again, feeling a deep sense of calm settle over her. Yesterday, she had walked into that dealership alone and been dismissed without a second thought. Today, she would walk in not just with her father, but with a presence so commanding that every person in that room would have no choice but to see her differently. The dealership was just around the corner now. The car slowed, the engine a low, steady hum. Amara glanced out of the tinted window, her lips curving into the faintest smile. They were almost there, and the lesson was about to begin. The dealership stood in the morning light, its tall glass walls shimmering like a trophy case. Inside, salesmen bustled about, preparing for another day of smooth talk and luxury deals. Cars were being dusted. Coffee was being brewed for early customers, and the receptionist was already tapping away at her computer. To them, it was just another day, until the sound came. It started faintly. A low, smooth purr of an engine, not loud like a sports car, but deep, commanding, the kind of sound that made heads turn before the car was even in sight. Then came another rumble, and another. People in the showroom looked toward the street, their conversations slowing. Through the glass, they saw 3 cars, moving in perfect unison down the road. First came the Lamborghini Urus, in pearl white, gleaming like it had just been carved. From ice, behind it, a Bentley Mulsanne, elegant and understated, its chrome catching the sunlight in blinding flashes. And in the center, leading them like a royal procession, was the black Rolls-Royce Phantom. The Phantom glided toward the dealership. With quiet authority, its polished hood ornament catching the light like a jewel. The way it moved was unlike anything else. It didn't race. It didn't roar. It simply arrived. And that alone was enough to draw attention from every passerby on the street. Inside, the tall salesman in the gray suit was halfway through explaining a model's features to a well-dressed couple when he glanced outside. His voice faltered. His eyes narrowed, trying to focus on the reflection in the glass. Then, slowly, his mouth opened slightly in disbelief. The cars pulled up right in front of the dealership, their engines idling with a low, almost menacing hum. The drivers stepped out first, all in matching black uniforms, and with practiced precision, they moved to open the rear doors of the Rolls-Royce. From the back seat, Kamau Bennett emerged first. Tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, he looked every bit the powerful man he was. His expression was calm, but his presence filled the air like a storm that had yet to break. And then, from the same car, Amara stepped out. Her posture was straight, her chin slightly lifted. She wasn't dressed extravagantly, just a soft cream blouse, tailored trousers, and polished shoes, but there was something in the way she carried herself now. Yesterday, she had walked into this place quietly and been brushed aside. Today, she walked with the silent confidence of someone who knew her worth and wasn't here to prove it only to remind others of it. The tall salesman froze where he stood. His eyes darted from Amara to Kamau, and then to the convoy outside. It didn't take him long to put the pieces together. His face drained of color. The receptionist, noticing the commotion, straightened in her seat. She glanced between the newcomers and her colleague, her lips parting in surprise. Even customers inside had turned to watch. Sensing that something significant was about to unfold, Kamau didn't raise his voice or demand attention. He simply walked through the glass doors, Amara beside him. The drivers and other luxury cars still waiting outside like sentinels. The soft chime of the door seemed louder than usual, the air in the showroom suddenly heavy. Every step they took seemed to echo. Staff members stopped mid-task. The salesman who had dismissed Amara the day before took an involuntary step back, his confident posture shrinking. Kamau's eyes swept the room before landing squarely on the man in the gray suit. "I believe you were the one who helped my daughter yesterday," he said evenly, his voice low but carrying through the entire showroom. The salesman swallowed hard, his hands clasping nervously in front of him. I might have. Yes, sir, I didn't realize." "No," Kamau interrupted, still calm. "You didn't realize? That's the point." The silence that followed was thick, unbroken except for the faint hum of the cars still idling outside. Amara stood slightly behind her father, watching the man who had so casually dismissed her, now struggling to meet her eyes. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She simply looked at him the same way she had looked at the cars yesterday. With quiet assessment, the lesson had only just begun. For a moment, the showroom felt like it wasn't breathing. It was still. thick with a mixture of surprise, unease, and curiosity. Even the music playing softly through the speakers seemed distant now, almost drowned out by the unspoken tension hanging in the room. Kamau Bennett didn't rush. He didn't need to. His very presence commanded attention, and every second he stood there. The weight of the situation sank deeper into the staff's minds. He moved forward with slow, deliberate steps, his gaze locked on the tall salesman in the gray suit, the same man who had dismissed his daughter like she was an inconvenience. The salesman's confident demeanor from yesterday was gone. His posture was smaller now, his hands fidgeting at his sides. Beads of sweat formed along his hairline. The other staff members, sensing trouble, tried to look busy, but their eyes kept darting toward the scene. The receptionist was no better. She straightened in her chair, her fingers frozen over her keyboard as though she might melt into her seat if she stayed still enough. She remembered Amara from the day before, remembered how she had brushed her off with a rehearsed smile and cold tone. Now, seeing the girl standing beside a man whose presence could silence a room, she wished she could undo her behavior. Customers began to whisper among themselves. A man in a navy suit leaned toward his wife, murmuring, "Isn't that Kamau Bennett?" The name traveled quickly in hushed tones. Some customers even took out their phones discreetly, as though they were witnessing the beginning of a scene they'd want to tell their friends about later. Kamau stopped directly in front of the tall salesman. For a long moment, he said nothing. He simply looked at the man the way a judge might look at a defendant before delivering a verdict. Then, in a voice that was calm but carried an unmistakable weight, he spoke. "Yesterday, my daughter came. Here, she walked in with respect, with the intent to buy. And you." Kamau's eyes flicked briefly to the receptionist before returning to the salesman. "You treated her as though she didn't belong." The salesman swallowed hard. "Sir." Kamau raised one hand slightly, and the man fell silent. "You assumed she could not afford what you sell. You judged her before you spoke to her. You decided, without knowing her name or her story, that she was not worth your time." The words hung in the air like heavy stones. No one moved. "I am not here to argue with you," Kamau continued. "I am here to show you what that judgment cost you." He turned slightly and gestured toward the glass walls. Outside, the 3 luxury cars gleamed in the sunlight, drawing stares from passers-by who had stopped on the sidewalk. The Phantom in the center looked like it owned the very ground it sat on. "That Rolls-Royce," Kamau said, his voice still. "Level could have been bought here, by my daughter. From you." The salesman's eyes flicked to Amara and back again, his face pale. "But now," Kamau went on, "it will not be. Because respect is the first thing you sell in this business. And you failed to sell it to her?" A murmur rippled through the showroom. Some customers nodded quietly, clearly agreeing with the sentiment. Others just stared, captivated by the exchange. Amara stood silently beside her father, her gaze steady. She wasn't there to humiliate anyone. She didn't need to. The truth was doing all the work for her. The tall salesman lowered his head. Slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, sir." "Miss Bennett?" You didn't think?" Cal said, his tone cutting off the man's attempt to explain. "That's the problem." The room felt heavier than before, but the lesson was clear. Everyone in that building now understood what had just happened, an unspoken but undeniable shift in power. And the next moments would seal it completely. The salesman stood frozen, his apology hanging in the air like a weak thread. The rest of the staff avoided eye contact, some pretending to shuffle papers or rearrange brochures. But no one could hide from the truth that had been laid bare in front of everyone. The room had gone silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. Kamau didn't look angry. He didn't need to. His calm, measured presence carried more weight than any raised voice ever could. He turned his gaze slowly from the salesman to the rest of the showroom, making sure every person within earshot heard his next words. "I built my business from nothing," he said evenly, "and I have taught my daughter that respect is the first currency you ever spend. You offer it before you see a bank statement, before you see a credit score, before you even see a person's name. Respect first, everything else comes after." Yesterday, this place failed that rule. He glanced at Amara, and she met his eyes. With a calm nod, she knew what was coming next. "I was prepared to make a significant purchase here today," Calmo continued, his voice steady, but edged with finality. "That money will now go to someone else, someone who treats people the way they should be treated." With that, he took a step back toward the entrance. Amara followed, her steps slow and deliberate. Every movement was deliberate, letting the silence do the talking. Outside, the drivers stood at attention, ready to open the doors. The sunlight poured over the glossy black Rolls-Royce Phantom, making it look almost unreal. Calmo paused at the doorway and looked back one last time. "Let this be your reminder," he said, his tone softer now, but just as firm. "You never know who is walking through that door. And if you treat someone as if they are nothing, you might lose everything they could have brought you." No one spoke. The salesman's shoulders slumped. The receptionist's face was pale. A few customers looked away, embarrassed for the staff. Others nodded, as if they had just witnessed a truth they would carry with them. Then Kamau and Amara stepped outside. The drivers opened the rear doors, and they both slid into the back seat of the Phantom. The convoy engines came to life again, their quiet but powerful rumble filling the street. People passing by stopped to watch as the three luxury cars pulled away in perfect formation, leaving the dealership behind. But their journey didn't end there. 15 minutes later, the same convoy arrived at another luxury dealership across town. This one welcomed them the moment they stepped out. Smiles, handshakes, refreshments. Samara was treated not just as a customer, but as a valued guest. Within an hour, paperwork was signed. A brand new Rolls-Royce Phantom, customized to Amara's liking, was purchased in full. The manager personally thanked her and her father, assuring them that their business was an honor as they drove home. Amara looked out the window at the city passing by. The sting of yesterday was gone, replaced by something far more powerful, a sense of quiet triumph. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't argued, but she had made her point, and somewhere across town, in that glass-walled showroom, a group of salespeople would never forget the day a young woman walked in, was judged, and then returned, not to seek revenge, but to teach a lesson they would remember every time a new customer stepped through their doors.